Hello, everyone. I am Corey Andrew Powell, host of the Motivational Mondays podcast presented by the NSLS. Thanks for joining me tonight for another important discussion. And as always, in our ongoing commitment to inspire change through conversation, we're thrilled to present tonight Building Better Mental Wellness, a mental health awareness conversation with Ritu Bhasin and Travis Chen. Now, before I introduce our guests and bring them to the and confidential support 24/7 for people in distress, including prevention and crisis resources for you and your loved ones. You can access this by just dialing 988 on your phone or visiting 988lifeline.org. Now, back to our guest for tonight. Ritu is an authenticity advocate, author, inclusion expert, and social justice advocate committed to helping people live their truth and their best, most empowered lives. Her new book is called We've Got This, Unlocking the Beauty of Belonging. It's a great book. I love it. I actually have like a couple copies. I'm going to give them as gifts. So not that I'm plugging the book like extra hard, but I'm just saying it's a really good book. And Travis Chen is the Gen Z founder, or co-founder, I should say, of a music app designed to help combat pandemic-induced anxiety and depression. He's been featured in Inc. magazine, Fortune, Business Insider, Next Shark, Yahoo Finance, and more. A lot of exposure for this wonderful new product. And along with his business partner, Brian, they actually raised $2.25 million in seed funding, which is incredible. And it's all going towards their efforts to combat youth mental health crisis. So throughout the live stream, we invite you to ask questions of our panelists, leave comments in the chat, and we will be moderating and we'll get to as many of them as we can. So everyone, please help me bring a warm welcome to our guests, Ritu Bhasin and Travis Chen.
Thank you so much for having us, Corey.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
Ritu, as I mentioned, your book, We've Got This, Unlocking the Beauty of Belonging. Tell us a little bit about why you wrote it and your inspiration behind it.
So can I just first of all start by saying, Corey, it's so nice to see you touching it and holding it. Now I'm going to do the same because it's not officially out yet. It'll be out in June, and there's only a handful of copies out there. And every time I touch it, I'm like, I can't believe I wrote this.
Yes. Well, you did, and you did a great job. I should have mentioned, yes, it's not out yet, but it's coming out. And actually, let's just say before you go further, people can pre-order the book now and read at read it at we'veGotThis.com, which is now on the screen. So, okay, now please share with us your inspiration behind this great book.
So it ties back to my own journey and struggle throughout my life to experience belonging. From a really young age, I experienced a bunch of really difficult things that really struck at my ability to belong. And in particular, I'm thinking about my childhood experiences with racist bullying. My parents are immigrants, and I grew up in an immigrant-run household. My parents immigrated to Canada, which is where I live, now over 50 years ago. And as new immigrants, they really struggled with how Canadian to make me and how Indian I should be. And so I just grew up with a lot of cultural confusion in my upbringing. And between that and then the racist bullying, I just deeply felt unworthy and unlovable. And I really struggled from a mental health perspective and more. And I brought this spirit and this fear of being who I am into my adult life when I chose to become a lawyer. I practiced law for a few years. I spent 10 years in the corporate towers, first practicing, and then I transitioned to doing HR for a large international firm. And the entire time I was in the corporate towers for 10 solid years, I felt like I constantly had to do a dance of like conforming and masking and hiding aspects of who I am to get ahead. And it struck at my ability to feel good about myself, to be who I am, and ultimately to belong. And I've spent the last solid 13 years as, first of all, running my own business as a DEI professional, expert, speaker, author. And I've learned a lot about how to claim my belonging and how to create cultures that are rooted in honoring people for who they are. And that's ultimately what led me to write this book. And I'm so excited about it.
Oh, that's so wonderful. And it really does speak to, we hear a lot about that phrase of living your most authentic life, being your most authentic self. And after a while, people think it sounds a bit cliche, but no, that really is a connection, a big part of living a more contented life, is once you become content with self and understand who you are unapologetically. I think that's such a big part of it. So thank you for sharing that. And Travis, the music app that you co-founded called Sound Mind, what inspired you to create this app that, of course, people can download as well, and they can check it out in the Apple Store and other areas to download your wonderful product? Please share with us what inspired you to create Sound Mind.
Yeah, well, Corey, thank you and to the team for having me on today's episode and to share our story. And Ritu, you and I have a lot of things in common. I was actually an immigrant myself. My family immigrated when I was 4 years old, and we experienced firsthand what it's like to live in a brand new culture, right? With people that is foreign to you, with ideologies, with cultures, with religions, with beliefs that were foreign to what we were used to. And that really stemmed my own resiliency and my grit to become, and do what I continue to do today. And that's to advocate for additional resources, for mental health resources, specifically for underserved and underrepresented backgrounds. But for me, mental health is something that I am very, very passionate about. And it stems from my days in high school. About 6 or 7 years ago, when I graduated, right before I graduated, I started having a lot of panic attacks and anxiety attacks. And it all stemmed from this competition that we had within amongst our peers, right? I grew up in a relatively highly competitive high school. I experienced these random kind of mental, just wreck within my own brain and with my own mental health, and I didn't know what it was. And I spoke with a mentor that I had at the time, and she recommended that I use meditation. And so I started using Eastern meditation at that time. I remember sitting in my high school parking lot right before school would start for at least 15 minutes and just meditating to myself. And it changed my life. And I needed to do something about this. And I know that this was something that I couldn't keep to myself, and I needed a way to scale these practices. And so I met my co-founder when I went to college, and we were actually random roommates at the time. And COVID hit, and he was doing research on how sounds and music can affect trauma and PTSD. And so we joined forces to build Sound Mind, which is what we have today. It's a mental health app, mental health tool to help students, youth, and everyone in general, because we all know the effects of sound, right? Sound is universal. It's a universal language, right? So the ability to use sound and music to help with individuals' lives and to improve people's lives is what we have at Sound Mind. And that's what inspires me. And, we have a book at Sound Mind, and Ritu, your book might be our next book, but we have a book club. And right now we're reading a book called Grit. And it talks about how, Angela Duckworth, and it talks about how everything that you do, right, whatever you do, it goes back to your why and your passion, right? And that's what I have realized myself, that every single thing that we do, every feature that we include, every change that we do within our product and our app, it goes back to my co-founder and I's why. And that why is how we can make a profound impact just a little bit in someone's lives that uses our app. And so this is a great webinar to be on today, and very, very excited to continue this conversation.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, I'm honored that you're both here, and that is such an amazing application of music. I'm a musician, so I I'm already biased that I loved what your app was about before I really understood it. But the more I read about it, for me, understanding that connection too between how much music in general has been such an anchor for so many people to soothe, to get them through hard times. We all have the soundtrack of our lives from our favorite artists who we go to when we feel certain ways. And so it's a great way. And I'm glad you mentioned the all ages, because I did want to ask you, Travis, is this something that was initially created for young people and now you say everyone could use it? Or was it always something that was like, okay, it's an app for everyone? What was the original intention?
Yeah, in the startup world, we talk about pivoting, right? Pivoting a lot and failing fast. And originally, it was meant for everyone. We didn't really find our niche until really about a year ago, when we realized that our app was really designed for youth in general, right? It's very kid friendly, very easy to use, very clean. Our UI designer, later we found out, actually had a background in creating tools and resources, and also just user interfaces in general for the youth market. And so we then went to schools, and schools just came banging on our door and saying, hey, like, we need this. Our students are looking for a anxiety relieving tool before a test, right after a test. It's testing season right now, especially amongst state testing for a lot of schools across the nation. And so they're utilizing your tool to help with their, relaxation before those moments when they have a lot of anxiety. And so it really was a gradual kind of organic pull, but also coupled with the youth mental health crisis that we saw, right? The pandemic was very much the first, it was a catalyst for the need for youth mental health resources, and a lot of resources were flooded into the space. And so we saw that as an opportunity, but coupled with this organic pull of our design and of our character. We have a really cool character creation platform within our app, where people can go in and create their own soundy, and that's their mental health buddy as they go along their whole entire mental health journey. And so that really was able to help us be pulled into the youth mental health space. But exactly to your point, right? In fact, we have many users that are in the elderly population that, in fact, their families have given the app to them because they have Alzheimer's, or they have other, dementia, for example, and they like the opportunity to use a platform of sound where they can play around, create their own music, create their own soundscapes, and that can help with that relaxation or their anxiety relieving. And so sounds is really cool because we actually have users across the world. It's not just English, excelling users. It's anyone that wants an app, and that wants an app for good, and helps, is all curated for their mental health.
Well, I think it's right on time, because as you mentioned, obviously there is a big mental health crisis with young people that we've seen. I think it's one of the most alarming rates of that particular demographic having those issues that we've seen in a long time. But it does bring what you just said about meditation. I want to go back to that, because Ritu, your part of your wonderful journey is this. I mean, literally, this trip you took to to India, and then you studied like the pure form of ancient yoga, like the actual, which you shared with me, is a very distinct difference from, I guess, what has been sort of turned into like the commercial yoga, class that we know. But you really got into it.
Like goat yoga.
I mean, I didn't want to call out anything specifically, but I almost said Lululemon, but
Oh yes,
so that might be,
goat yoga with your Lululemons on, your
right.
$200 Lululemons on, yeah.
Right, like this particular practice did not require you to have
no
$200 yoga pants. However, meditation and breath work, are really fundamental to mental wellness more than people understand. So talk a little bit about what that did for you and how people can benefit from breath work and meditation.
Like, absolutely. And may I also just start by saying, Travis, I love what you have created. And I feel like there's so much intersection between what you're doing and what I'm doing and what I believe in, and the power of sound in particular as a medicine to heal us. I deeply believe in that. And I talk quite a bit about the power of music and sound and vibration, and in We've Got This, because we know that when through listening to rhythm and dancing to rhythm and meditating on rhythm and chanting on rhythm, we are able to release stress and tension and energy that's trapped in our bodies, that helps us to stabilize and settle our nervous systems. And I think that that's so profound and so important. So I mentioned earlier that I was working in the towers, and I was working away in the towers. I worked in the towers in my 20s and in my 30s. And I was like a good Indian daughter, working really hard to make her parents proud and society proud and like fit the mold on like what success would look like. And even though I knew mentally, spiritually, and physically that it wasn't bringing me joy, but I pushed ahead. I engaged in override, even though my mind was like, I hate my life. And my spirit was like, I feel vacuous. And my physical health, I could tell that my body was signaling, this is not working for me. I trudged ahead with it until I eventually realized this is not serving me and I need to change the way I'm living. A few things happened. I'm happy to dig more deeply into that, but I talk a lot about it online and in my new book. That's what ultimately took me to a yoga ashram in the south of India, which felt right for me anyhow, because my parents are from India. My ancestral lineage is responsible for creating yoga thousands and thousands of years ago. Yoga isn't just about the asana practice. It's about a way of life that's already very much embedded into how I was raised and how I already deeply feel and believe, and it's in my bloodline. And so studying yoga and then deepening my own mindfulness and meditation practice has been transformative. And so we know from Western research, from poking and prodding mindfulness practices from the East, although those of us whose ancestors created these technologies thousands and thousands of years ago already knew this. We didn't need Western science to validate that which we already knew, but that aside, we know that when we take deeper breaths, and in particular, we inhale and then focus on the exhalation, in particular, slowing it down, it activates the parasympathetic nervous system, or helps to signal to the body, I'm safe, I'm safe, I'm good, I'm safe, I can relax. We send more blood and we send oxygen throughout the body. We are able to signal to our system to calm down. Our stomach relaxes, our muscles relax. So much more happens when we are taking deep diaphragm or belly breaths. When we are also being mindful, and by the way, I define mindfulness as the practice of understanding, what am I thinking? What am I sensing in my body? What am I feeling in a non-judgmental way? So we're judgment neutral. We're clocking what are the voices in our head saying, what's happening in my body? What am I feeling in a neutral, non-judgmental way? When we are engaging in breath work, or we're simply sitting with our eyes closed and just taking a moment to go within, this too can be mindful. Or stirring a pot as we are cooking, or going for a walk and listening to instrumental music. All of this can be mindful because it enables us to tune within and hear the voices and settle the body and release whatever stress or emotions are coming up. These types of practices can be so helpful in situations when we're feeling really stressed and tense and unhappy and unwell. And I can tell you, as someone who teaches inclusion for a living and who has deeply struggled over the last few years in the pandemic, repeatedly with my own mental health. So I don't live with mental illness, but I certainly have experienced diminished mental health throughout my life, and had episodic experiences with experiencing depression and anxiety. I can tell you that it's these types of practices that can help us to manage moments that feel very, very difficult, but also keep us from being pushed into activation. And so I think that it's so important that we really dig deep, each of us, into landing on what feels good for us. Like, not every practice. So breath work works for me. I love breath work. For some of you, you'd be like, I cannot effing stand breath work. I'm not doing breath work. Fine, don't do breath work. or some people love journaling. Great, journal. I'm always going to suggest that you do something for the mind and you do something for the body. So is that massage? Is that stretching? Let's go back to Travis and sound as medicine for healing. Is that dancing with music really loud so you're shaking out the energy? Like, or is it listening to music and just softly being with yourself? Whatever it is
Chilling
that
out.
causes you to calm down, do it after
Right.
today.
Yeah. I think, on that same note, I want to just, before I take go to another question, I want to make sure I stress that, as Travis said, he was meditating, he wasn't like in some studio or like a yoga class. Like, you incorporated meditation in your life. I had a guest on Motivational Mondays named Vishen Lakiani, who's amazing. And, he talked about meditation is not like this sort of thing we have to sit Indian style and, with candles burning in this whole, it can be anywhere that you find that. He says you do it in the car, you do it before, you go to work. So people who are watching and listening, please look into that. Meditation, breath work, and yoga, even in its current form, it is still breathing exercises. So we're not knocking modern yoga, but we're just saying there is a deeper history to yoga than what maybe we are learning in the typical yoga class currently. So all those are great, and we encourage all of them. I do want to take a couple questions that came in, which I love. And this will, I'll start with you, Travis, on this one, especially because you're of a younger demographic as well. And you guys are sort of seeing a lot of stuff that maybe past generations did not have to see so frequently. And someone from LinkedIn, Kimberly from LinkedIn, says tragic news and events like mass shootings have a profound effect on mental health. How can we protect our mental well-being without hiding from what's happening in the world? And it's a loaded question because every day there's a headline and we're like, oh my goodness. So Travis, what do you think about how do you navigate your mental wellness when there's seemingly a barrage of negativity?
Yeah, well, I talk about this a lot on my own LinkedIn page. And one of the things that I mention is that my generation, Gen Z, has gone through a lot growing up, right? In fact, if we think about it and look back at history, right? 2 years after I was born, 9/11 happened. And that changed a lot of geopolitical climate. It changed diplomacy amongst, the United States and the rest of the world. It changed the way that we even, went to airports, right? No longer can we walk up to the gate and drop off our families at the gate. We had to go through, incredible security, right? A few years after that, we saw the financial crisis in 2007, 2008, right? With the housing market.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of my friends' families, moms and dads, aunts and uncles, grandparents, etc., lost their jobs, right? And they couldn't put food at at dinner at night, right, on the table. Quickly after that, we saw radical politicalism, right, that uprooted a lot of families' relationships and family relationships, right? And so
Yeah.
there was this constant changing. And then guess what? 4 years later, COVID happened, right? And if the entire world shut down, and we had to go back to our homes, and we were locked in our homes, right? And so our generation has faced, and of course, to answer Kimberly's question, our world has faced a lot of tragic events, including mass shootings, right? And also natural disasters that are not just the United States, but not just North America, but the entire world has faced, right? I remember sitting in my parents' room watching, the 2011 tsunami hit Japan, right? Live photos, right? And we had family members in Japan as well, right? And so just this entire kind of compounding effect of what our generation has faced, where we didn't know what stability looked like, right? I have colleagues on our SoundMind team, a little bit older than I am, and they remember 90s being a joyous time across society, right?
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah,
it was fun. It was.
But for us, every 2 years, we're facing something new. So it comes back to your own ability to understand that, hey, it's okay to have the world around you face a lot of different difficult times and pivot and change. But what you need to realize yourself is you need to understand how you can be calm, right? Practice meditation, practice mindfulness, right? Understand when the world is facing all of these different changes and storm hitting, that you can go back to that peace and find that peace within yourself, right? Whether that's practicing, for me, I love journaling. I spend at least 30 minutes a day before I go to bed journaling and writing down and reflecting on my day, world events, my team, our company, our startup, my friends, my families, my relationships with my friends and families, right? And so it's really important to find that inner peace, and that comes back to understanding what that is for every single person, because that looks different for every single individual. So practicing that early and starting early and putting that into your routine, especially those with kids too, teaching them that, take some time before that test to relax, right? Take some time before you go to, bed to listen to sounds or listen to meditation or journal, to help you with these practices, because we all know that routine comes with time, and that comes with practice. And so being able to have those skill sets, right, and in your kind of toolbox, will make some profound effects on your mental well-being.
Yes, it's important also. You tapped briefly into the headlines that are a constant, every so often, every 2 years, you get these headlines. Now it's like every day, every week, every hour, it seems. I will say there is also, Kimberly, I will say to you directly, to be very careful of the consumption of media. I know for me, I have to literally now turn things off because it is so much inundation of the negative. And I want everyone to know there's beautiful, wonderful things happening in the world every day, but that's not newsworthy. That's not going to make the headline news that, a sweet little boy helped an old lady across the street with her groceries when he saw her struggling, or, someone got a kitten out of a tree. All these great things happen all the time. People lending people money and giving them groceries so they don't have any food to eat, and the neighbor looking out for them. All these things happen. I contribute to that. So what I would say is contribute to the good. Be a part of all the positivity, and really sort of, if you can, be very conscious of how much news you're consuming, because it's designed to actually be sensationalized and salacious so that it holds you. And what will do that is pretty much all the bad stuff. So that is what I would advise on that. And another question,
Corey,
comes,
can I just chime in on that?
please, yes.
So we know from trauma work that we can be activated by things we see or hear about that haven't even directly happened to us. It's like vicarious trauma or secondary trauma. It's like it didn't happen to me, but I heard about it or I read about it. But because my nervous system has already felt grief about an experience like this, or it's happening to someone who looks like me. For example, if you think about a lot of the hate crimes that we're seeing, or another person of color is attacked or killed in their house of worship or unarmed by the state, it's like my people are under attack. The body can feel it. And so I talk a lot about this in my new book, about the power of developing what I call core wisdom. And core wisdom is the inner knowing that we hold within that helps us to better understand, what is my mind saying to me? And what is happening in my body? Where am I feeling the sensations, the tightness, the stress? And most importantly, how can I release this activation that's coming up? When we have a more settled and resilient nervous system, we're less likely to be activated by taking in the news and hearing about trauma-inducing events in society. And so this is another reason why focusing on our mental health and our physical health, but when I say physical health, I don't mean like eat well and exercise, but yes, I do. But I mean more as in that during the day when you feel like crying because someone's mean to you, and then you don't let it out because you're in public, and then you feel like I just push the tears down. The tears don't just go nowhere. They don't disappear into the ether. Those emotions get stuck inside of us. So that the ability to learn to release the emotion and not worry about the judgment of others. So you couldn't cry during the day because it didn't feel appropriate or right or whatever. Come home later in the evening, take yourself back to that experience memory and let the emotion out. So you're taking care of your physical body. That's what helps us to create more resilient nervous systems. And so that when we do intake information, it's less likely to like knock us out entirely, or if it does activate and trigger us, we can pull more out of it. But I'd be the first to tell you, even with my core wisdom as a woman of color who's experienced years of relentless racist bullying, I find hearing about mass shootings or about racist attacks on communities of color to be really upsetting. And so I just limit my intake altogether, because it's just not good for my mental health and my spiritual health.
Right. Yeah, that's what I mean. I agree totally. I just, we know these things are happening in the world. I don't need to read about them every day, because it's a lot, and it definitely can impact you negatively. And on that same note, speaking of negative impact in an environment, Jackie from LinkedIn asks, "How can I prioritize my mental health in a hostile work environment while dealing with burnout?" This is a loaded question too, because it very well, in my opinion, I'll just say, sometimes you may have to reevaluate, is that the environment for you? Is that the job for you? I mean, I think that's the first starting point. But Travis, what's your thought on that?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Corey, right? It's important for us to all to almost like to come out of that zone, right? Of that, whether that is going to another city or visiting your family or friends, or just kind of coming out of that water, right? And stepping out and saying, is that work environment, is what I'm doing actually what I want to do, right? Is that how I want to spend my days and my weeks and months, right?
Right.
That's the number one thing that I would tell, what was the individual Jackie to think about. But secondly, it's, we can only control what we can control, right? So control what you can do, whether that is, speaking up for yourself, or pivoting your career, right? Start looking for another job, or start looking for another team, maybe within the same company that you can go to and transition into. And to really think about how you can take those actions quickly, because I've been there where we work in, groups and teams where it's just not fun and it's exhausting, right? Not just at the workplace, but also at home in your personal lives. And we know that the whole self, right? The whole self is important to bring to your work environment, but also to your home environment when you come home, right? When you're dealing with family, when you're dealing with friends, you want to be able to have your entire well-roundedness of your entire life. And so that's what I would recommend to Jackie. And then lastly, just to, practice what we're doing and sharing today, right? Whether that's journaling or meditation or breath work or listening to sounds and understanding what works for you. So I think a lot of the times we need to take control of our own lives, right? We can't let other people control our life. We are the only ones that can control our lives at the end. Ritu, anything to add to that?
So burnout is a tricky beast, because burnout isn't an experience where we can take a week off or 2 weeks off on vacation and then come back and just jump right in. Burnout is an actual experience, the deep fatigue within our spirits, in our minds, bodies. And it's also about a cynicism around, is it even likely that change and shift can happen in the current paradigm of the work environment I'm in? And so it's like we really question whether things are actually going to change, because despite repeated comments from our leaders that things will get better, they don't. And so I very much agree with what Travis, you shared. I'll also acknowledge that sometimes it just feels really hard. It's like my financial reality or the situation I'm in, my familial responsibilities prevent me from leaving this job. I need to stay here for now. And I would say this is where you would triple, quadruple down into your body work, your breath work, your healing work, your therapy work to take care of yourself. And then the last thing I'll mention here is that find your people within your workplace. And so if you're in your immediate universe, are there a few people that you can really anchor to and connect with and spend a lot of time with and work with, or at least talk to throughout the day, around whom you feel safe and you feel really good? And if they're not in your immediate universe, where else in your organization can you find your people? Because sometimes we're in a situation where it's like, I just can't leave yet, but it's unbearable. So then who can I reach out to. And in fact, I call these people our clouds. Like on Instagram, I often talk about my clouds, and even in my new book. And when I say clouds, this came from, like, as a professional speaker, I would, pre-COVID a lot, although it's starting again, I would travel around speaking, and I'd always look out the window in the plane and I'd see these clouds, and I'd be like, wouldn't it be so beautiful to just jump into the cloud and relax and feel at ease and just breathe? And I view relationships like this. There are people in our lives, at work, in our personal lives, around who it's like jumping into a cloud. So find your clouds around whom you can just relax and be, even in the workplace.
I love that. Yeah, that's wonderful, because I think, so many times it is about, in general, environments that make you feel productive, that people are supportive. And even outside of work, it's important that you're like not around negative people, and you know how to separate yourself from those sorts of environments when it's time. Work is a lot more difficult, but with Ritu's advice, that is a way that you can cope with a workplace that might not be ideal. But also remember that you are not your job, like you are not your work. So remember that as well. And so you have to really find who you are and find like your core as a person that's separate from the job. It's another question that's come up that I think is really interesting. I think it's, make sure I have her name right. It's Kalita from LinkedIn. She says, I'm balancing full-time work, an internship, and being a wife and mother. So what are some tips that can help with mental exhaustion and low energy? And I think some of the things we've mentioned are already important to answering that question. But I think a bigger issue here I want to address is that when you're a caregiver, even if you're a mom, I think that there's this idea that it's selfish to think of yourself first with your health and your mental stability and self-care. But if you are the caregiver for other people, you have to be selfish first to take care of you, because you can't take care of other people if you're not well. Is that something that makes sense to you guys? Or am I just wanting to be selfish and be about me? Travis, what do you think about that?
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I absolutely agree with that, Corey. I actually used to be a person that would prioritize other people before my own health and my mental health, and I went downhill. I mean, I gained a lot of weight. My mental health I was in exhaustion, but I had to come back to this idea of, if I'm not healthy, if I'm not mentally stable, if I'm not prioritizing my own career, how can I help others, right? And so that came back to this idea of how I should prioritize myself. And it's okay to say no, right? That's something that I've practiced and realized kind of in recent years, that it's okay to say no, to prioritize your own well-being. And for those friends who, won't allow you that space, we should reevaluate, who and who you should let into your life. But to answer Kalita's question, I actually go back to my role as a mentor for a lot of current high school and also college students. And I always tell people about the hedgehog concept. And it's a concept, if you look it up on Google, it's a concept that correlates, what you're good at, what you're passionate about, and what drives your economic engine, right? And so if you think about those three and you combine those three, you're able to really realize what your career will look like and how you should strive for that next role that can help you and provide you those three correlation together. And so, I understand Kalita might be experiencing a lot of difficulty balancing, full-time work, an internship, being a wife and a mother. But it's important to realize that you need to prioritize your own career to help you fulfill, being a wife and a mother. And also, it goes back to the idea of understanding and reevaluating what helps you with your mental health. And I love, Ritu, your idea that you brought up, right? Understanding and saying, like, doing deep meditation work or yoga or journaling to realize that, you might be in a situation that's tough right now, but you need to be in that space in order for you to get through to your next step. So that's what I would say to Kalita.
Thank you. Ritu, how about you?
So I think about, as someone who does diversity, equity, inclusion work for a living, and as a fierce advocate for self-care,
Right.
I think a lot about the quote from the famous, formidable Audre Lorde, who, as you may know, was a Black American lesbian, author, activist, academic. And she wrote, several decades ago, caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation. And that is an act of political warfare. And I love that quote because, especially as women of color, when we come from communities that consistently experience inequities, there's even more of a pronounced negativity that's placed upon us when we take care of ourselves. And yet we arguably, when we come from communities that experience inequities, need to take care of ourselves even more because of all the hate and hardship coming our way. Like, and I often will say, like you'll see me say on Instagram, that if life is hard, hate makes a hard life even harder. And so it's incumbent upon us to take care of ourselves so that we can do our best and we can be thriving individually, so that we can bring our best to collective community experiences and help each other rise. And so I think that individually, it's important for us to take care of ourselves, but also collectively, this is what causes disruption of systems of inequities. And then the last thing I'll mention here is to Kalida, that I am a caregiver. My mom is really unwell. She lives with Alzheimer's, and it's interesting, Travis, I could go on and on about how important music has been in my mom's journey with Alzheimer's and connecting with her and over the last several years. And she's in the late stages now, and she's in palliative. And I, last year in particular, was deeply struggling with my mental health because of being a caregiver. And it got to the point where it was like, I have to stop and put the life mask on myself and not allow the guilt of being a bad daughter to take over, because I'm struggling to the point where I'm not doing well now, and someone's going to have to step in to caregive for me. And so sometimes it's really important that we do take that step back. And so as an example, I, all of last year, went to see my mom twice a week, and it's an hour drive to see her, an hour back. I run a global business. I wrote my second book. I was running a team, like everything I was doing last year, I was still squeezing in twice a week, driving to see my mom. And in December, January of this year, I decided, nope, I'm only going to go once a week. And by the way, I think my mom still loves me. The universe is good to me. And I am feeling better and doing better by not going twice a week. And the guilt that I had, I've let that go. Like, I've offered it to the earth, because taking care of myself is actually far more important.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Yes, I want everyone to, if you just listen to both of these responses. I mean, the key takeaway is you must take care of yourself first before you can really be fully there as a caregiver for other people. And leadership, that is the exact same formula, because you cannot be a leader if you yourself are not competent, well, and in charge of your leadership. And in fact, there's another question that follows up with that, where someone asks that, what can I do as a leader to support my team members' mental health, their mental well-being, as they undergo various changes in the workplace? And I think for me, I would just say, I think it is one of those things where they have to make sure they feel like they're in a safe environment to be able to come and talk about those changes that they're uncomfortable with. But in a response to leadership and how leaders have to lead other teams who may be struggling, what do you advise in that respect, Travis?
I think it's really important to ensure that you create a space of belonging and inclusion, right? Ritu, you're a professional in this space. And so we all know that when we feel like we can go to our leaders and express our whole self, right? And express our difficulties and our challenges, but also celebrate our wins, that's really important, right? And so we need to create a space where we allow that freedom of ideas to flow, of energy to come out and express those challenges and those frustrations, but celebrate the wins. And so what we do at SoundMind is every single month, by the way, we have 2 mental health days. So mental health days, no one no one needs to schedule any meetings. No one needs to come to work. They take that day for themselves. And beyond that, we have Friday check-ins where we have a task aid, which we use as a kind of like a daily, activity journal of what you're accomplishing and doing. But we share out at the end, what you're feeling, how your mood is, and also give shout outs to other team members, right? If we see that someone shouted someone out and they help them with the project or help them with a challenge that they're going through, we share that and we celebrate those wins. We also recognize, right, when people are going through difficult and hard times and give them that space to heal, to relax, and to help make sure that they have the time and space to do so, because we can't be advocating for mental health if we don't have mental health ourselves, right? Good mental health ourselves. And so as a leader, really opening up that space, giving them that opportunity to share how they're doing and how they're feeling. And sometimes it means creating an environment where you're not in that room, right? Where they can equally peer-to-peer share what they're feeling and their challenges, right? And that's okay too, right? That's okay too.
Right.
I always encourage everyone to talk about mental health, right? And as a leader, breaking that stigma. If your team is very stigmatized when it comes to conversations on mental health, being that leader to share about your own personal stories and what you're going through as well, because likely someone else on your team is also experiencing the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I would just add too, as having been a manager and overseeing teams, one of the things that I learned quickly about that job was that it was not even about managing the job because they all were competent. That's why we hired them. It was more about managing the people. I had to be empathetic and understand and compassionate because, we all have our problems outside of work. So I understood that I may need to pull someone aside into the office and say, hey, what's going on today? Are you okay? How are you doing? Just being aware, being compassionate, and being present with your employees or your team, your manager, the team you're managing. It goes a long way. That question was from Caitlin, and I have another question as well. When it comes to the idea of trying to, I guess, bridge gaps between generations in general, I think some of the problems too that we have today are that the different generations aren't seemingly on the same page. But I think at the same time, do you feel like, Travis, for y'all, ask you, is there more of a mental health issue that you realized in your data that, when you were doing your data for your app to build your app, was it that there was a bigger concern of mental health in young people more than the elderly or the older people, or was it about the same as far as what data showed you? Who needed mental health services more?
Great question. We realized, actually, let me take a step back and kind of give a history of the youth mental health space and how we work with schools. In fact, when we think about the days that students are in schools, they're only in schools 175 days a year. So they're actually in schools less days than they're outside of schools. And so when we think about for youth, they often look at their schools or their school campuses as their safety net, right? They have electricity, they have Wi-Fi, they have AC, they have a roof right over their heads, they have food. In fact, the free and reduced lunch program, which is a national federal program in the United States, a lot of states are now making it universal. So they have breakfast, lunch, and sometimes dinner as well. But when they're outside of those four corners, they are lost, right? They don't have resources, they don't have reliable Wi-Fi, they don't have electricity, they don't have heaters and air conditioning. And so they then need a tool for them to come back to recentering themselves and understanding how to get through those tough times, right? And so we actually, in alignment with kind of bridging the digital divide, right? We actually are now partnering with a company called SureConnect to provide these underserved families and everyone on SNAP, Medicaid, Medi-Cal, Section 8 housing, et cetera, a free device with SoundMind pre-installed on it with unlimited broadband service, right? We did this because we wanted to make sure that every single family, regardless of their background, regardless of their zip code, had access to a mental health resource and to make sure that they have Wi-Fi broadband technology, especially with the summer months coming up. But to answer your question, that's what we saw. We saw an opportunity to instill practices in the youth generation to help them with their mental well-being. And the idea, the hope, right, is that in 10, 15 years, that these individuals are inspired that they were able to use a tool at such a young age, and they continue these practices with their own mental health journey to ensure that they manage their mind, right? We're a mind management tool, really, to manage their mind and their mindfulness as they grow up and as they go into the adult world. And so we wanted to do this. We I come from the education background. I served on the California PTA Board of Managers, also on my local school board. So I really saw this opportunity to make a difference and make a difference in the lives of youth generation.
That's super. Yeah, well, we definitely appreciate that because, as we mentioned earlier, that's such a big impacted demographic. But I wanted to make sure that, we're not like now so focused on like the young people that we're forgetting that, there's the rest of the population also maybe needing some, a lot of focus as well with their mental health services. Ritu, I want to ask you, as we're getting close to the end of our time here, we talked about a lot of different things like journaling, breath work, meditation. For me personally, I want to just make sure I give a shout out to good old fashioned therapy. It's also very good. For me, at 28 years old, I share that I went to therapy, a very difficult time I was going through. And luckily, I had a good therapist. And just being able to talk to someone who understood behavior and maybe understood reactions and why we do certain things, I would say it saved my life. That's just me personally. I got something very positive out of therapy. What is your thought on that, Ritu?
So I am an early adopter of talk therapy in particular because I was in university in the mid-90s when I first started therapy. I was 20 years old at a time when there was so much shame and stigma attached to doing talk therapy or any form of therapy. Mm-hmm. And I can remember deeply struggling based on all of the stuff that had happened to me in my childhood, feeling pressure as a university student to manage my life, and knowing that there were counseling services on campus, but being so ashamed of going and not wanting anyone to know. So I would go to the student center where the counseling services were, where the therapists were set up, and I would wait to make sure that no one could see me. And then I would run and slide in to the office. And now here we are, like several decades later, and I'm like all over LinkedIn, on Instagram going, I do so much therapy. I can't even. In fact, I've done 27 years of therapy. I'm in my late 40s. And so here's what I can tell you as someone who has done 27 years of therapy. I have done multiple modalities of therapy. I've done talk therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, Gestalt, somatic. I could go on and on and on and on. There are moments in our life where we need experts, and we should avail experts, and not one modality will serve for our entire time. So for example, I did a lot of talk therapy in my 20s and 30s. Over the last several years, I've been doing a lot of body-based therapy because I've been digging deep into how trauma lives in my body from my childhood. And trauma isn't just in our minds. More importantly, it's trapped in our bodies. And for me, actually doing the deep, deep body work, the somatic body-based therapy has been critical. And so what am I saying? I'm a big proponent of therapy and using experts when we need help. I'm also a big proponent of shaking things up and trying different modalities over time, and also taking a minute, taking a pause, taking a break. Because I had one therapist say to me, I loved him. He said to me something to the effect of like, an over-examined life can also be problematic. And so sometimes we just need to take a minute too. And so here's the thing. Your body will tell you what you need. Build your core wisdom, tune in, and find the answers within.
Oh my goodness. What a wonderful way nice little bow you put on that. It was perfect. No, I agree. I thank you so much for that. And I thank you both for being here tonight. Such wonderful, inspiring words of wisdom, Ritu Bhasin and Travis Chen. We appreciate you guys being here. Thank you. And you can all learn more about Ritu and Travis by scanning or taking a screenshot of the QR code on the screen. And additionally, members will receive a post-event email with additional resources on how to take action from today's conversation, including links to Ritu and Travis's work. And lastly, as I always say at the end of each live stream, you make change happen through truth, knowledge, understanding, taking action, and more, just being engaged. So remember, when it comes to mental health and wellness, one thing we all can do is show more compassion and empathy towards others. And that is a well-proven attribute of successful leadership. So thank you all for watching and being here tonight with us. Good night.